The India-US strategic partnership is one that's been developing now over the last several decades, and there's a great sense of optimism over here in India that it is headed in a particular direction. To tell us a little bit about that, and there are so many important global events taking place, Tulsi Gabbard with us, the Director of National Intelligence. It's wonderful to have you here in India, and thank you so much for speaking to us. In terms of the strategic relationship and the intelligence arrangements between India and the United States, to what extent is it premised on perhaps an expansionist or an expanding China and the Asia-Pacific region?
You know, the ties between our two countries, the United States and India, go very, very far back. And so what we're continuing to see is a strengthening of that partnership and recognizing that the mutual interests of both of our countries are centered around peace, prosperity, freedom, and security. So now as we see a new administration coming in with President Trump's leadership in the United States, of course, Prime Minister Modi's long-standing leadership here in India, we have two leaders of our two great countries who are very good friends and who are very focused on how we can strengthen those shared objectives and those shared interests.
So in a sense, it's taking forward what we already have in terms of the strategic partnership, and that's one of your primary goals, right?
It is.
And how were your meetings to that end?
It is. I've been having great meetings, and of course this began with Prime Minister Modi's visit to President Trump in Washington, D.C., very shortly after he was inaugurated back into office for a second term, where they really set the tone and set the vision for where a stronger U.S.-India partnership and friendship can lead to. And so my visit here is really predicated on the work that has already been done, and I've been having great conversations with my counterparts here in the Indian government. I just met with the Minister of Defense a few minutes ago, and looking forward to visiting with Prime Minister Modi here later today.
And you met the Prime Minister in Washington as well some time back. How did that go? I mean,
it was,
we saw the pictures.
It was great. I had the opportunity to meet him several years ago. It was good to see him again, and it was actually very perfectly timed, where it was maybe 1 or 2 hours after I was officially sworn into this position as Director of National Intelligence that he arrived in Washington, D.C. and had the opportunity to welcome him back to the United States.
One of your primary concerns and one of your primary responsibilities is to deal with the threat of terror. And at the moment, we see a great deal of that out of Yemen. We see attacks on shipping taking place, and we see the United States being very much on the offensive. Is that a prelude for something larger, perhaps even a ground offensive going forward?
I mean, you look at President Trump's leadership going back through his first term as president, he has been and remains very committed to combating and defeating the threat of Islamist terrorism that not only affects the United States, the American people, our own safety and security, but it is affecting so many people in different parts of the world. We can see different terrorist groups, the Houthis in Yemen being one of them, that President Trump has redesignated after President Biden took them off of the terrorist list, redesignated them appropriately as a terrorist organization, and taking action where the previous administration failed to. The Houthis have been disrupting maritime trade and passage for a very long time, and no serious effort has been taken to stop that disruption. Our country and other countries should not be in a position to have to make a decision to reroute commerce going through that area simply because of the Houthi threat that exists. So President Trump has taken decisive action for our own safety, security, and prosperity. And I know we'll look to other affected countries, as there are many who are impacted by this, to similarly take action.
The other big international talking point is obviously the situation between Russia and Ukraine, and we're all optimistic, and I've covered the war 3 times, on seeing peace in the area. Tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people on both sides have lost their lives. Be that as it may, if President Putin doesn't come on the table with the peace agreement which has been proposed by the United States, can Washington indefinitely keep arming Ukraine and, in a sense, allowing them to continue their fight?
President Trump is seeing this ongoing conflict with very clear eyes. And he has made his position and his priority very clear, which is to bring about an end to this war. So he is focused on peace. The negotiations have just begun. He's looking forward to success in those negotiations, not for himself, but for the cause of peace and to stop the killing of innocent and taking of innocent lives there. So he has the best negotiators working with both the Ukrainians and with Russia and with Putin. And we look forward to seeing the continued progress that we've already seen over a very short period of time. I think it's important to point out that under the previous administration, during which this war began, there was no effort. There was no effort at all towards peace. There was no effort to have direct dialogue with Putin and with Russia to try to bring about an end to this war. So already, in a very short period of time, President Trump has made much more progress towards peace than any effort that has occurred by anyone previously. So we're very encouraged by this progress, and President Trump remains committed to the objective of peace.
How much of what you're talking about now is premised on a successful conversation between President Trump and President Putin? I believe that might take place tomorrow or day after.
Well, as you know, with any of these kinds of negotiations, there's a lot of work that goes between people representing both countries or all of the countries involved in this situation. And at the appropriate time, I'm sure that President Trump will have a very productive conversation with Putin, once again, rooted in his unwavering commitment to peace.
Yeah. Closer to India, Bangladesh, the subcontinent, we've seen a lot of political changes over there, a lot of violence over there, and several reports of attacks on minorities. Is the United States concerned about the situation there and the need for stability at all levels, not just political stability?
Yeah, of course. The long time, unfortunate persecution and killing and abuse of religious minorities, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, Catholics, and others, has been a major area of concern for the United States government and, of course, President Trump and his administration. The talks are just beginning between President Trump's new cabinet coming in and the government of Bangladesh, but this continues to remain a central focus area of concern, once again, with the threat of Islamist terrorists and their overall effort, the global effort of all of these different groups that are really rooted in their same ideology, their same objective, which is to rule and govern with an Islamist caliphate. This obviously affects people of any other religion other than one that they find acceptable, and they choose to carry this out through very violent and terroristic means. President Trump remains committed once again to identifying this ideology that drives Islamist terrorism, helping to defeat that ideology and defeat their ability to exact that terror on people, the American people and others.
Right. Well, one final question to you. I know you've got a very busy schedule. You are a practicing and a devout Hindu.
Yes.
And you've just missed Holi in India.
Unfortunately.
What does Holi mean to you?
You know, it is a wonderful and colorful celebration of life and really the connection that we all share as people. And this is something from my home in Hawaii, where we greet each other with aloha. Here in India, we greet each other with namaste, but really the deeper spiritual meaning of both of these words is the same in recognizing the eternal and divine spirit that exists within every one of us and that spiritual connection that we have. So for me, at a personal level, this is very, very meaningful, but it's also very practical once again, as our two countries and others in the world should remain focused on our pursuit of peace.
It's wonderful speaking to you. Thank you very much
nice
for speaking
to see you.
Well, there you have it, Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence over here in India. That's broader strategic relationship between India and the US, so very important. But the world is in a difficult situation now, whether it's Yemen, whether it is the situation in West Asia, and certainly Russia, Ukraine, and closer to home in Bangladesh as well. So her thoughts perhaps reflect where the US administration is looking at all of this, and perhaps there is peace in the horizon. Back to the studio.